Hello YouTube, this is Let's Argue, where I react to your hot takes, unpopular opinions, and tough questions. You can post them here under this video for the next episode, and then I will react to those then. As you can see, this is being recorded live. Hi YouTube, what's up? Let's get cooking with our first take from Firm. While I'm long past drinking the Souls combat Kool-Aid, I think a lot of critics of it are equally reductive in describing it as roll plus R1 when playing as a melee build. Elden Ring took clear steps to try and make it so this wasn't the case, with stuff like charged heavies and weapon arts being more viable. That, plus a lot of attacks being able to be strafed and or outpaced, so if you're playing the standard dodge and melee setup, you'll feel a difference using those. I'm still not hugely impressed by it, but critics of the game's combat should still come from an informed angle. I think this is a reasonable take. This is a fair take. I can't really disagree with this. Especially, I think the last part, you should come at things from an informed angle, does contextualize it. I think there is a culture of seeing a popular movement, a hype movement, and then just kind of getting swept up with it, going along with it, not thinking about it too hard, and that is kind of annoying. And I do think Elden Ring, in fairness, it does a little more by just giving you a wider variation of attacks with larger or slightly different hitboxes at least, or attacks that do a little more hit stun. I definitely distinctly noticed that. I noticed trade-offs between, okay, I'm gonna dual wield now, I'm gonna switch to this weapon art, I have to unequip the shield to do the thing, and blah. That is sort of neat, but we really are scraping the bottom of the barrel a little bit, right? By trying to find those scraps of goodness in the combat, I think. One thing I thought about is that with most 3D combat action games, it's very rare that the thing people talk about is the boss fights, or one-on-one, 1v1 fights in general. Usually when we talk about the most legendary kind of 3D action melee combat games, like Bayonetta, DMC4, Ninja Gaiden 2, God Hand, we cite all the mob fights as examples, right? We talk about the moment-to-moment combat that you go through in these games, how pocket cutting, and most casual people talk about those boss fights. I mean, you're right. I think, but that's also... See, I'm gonna make a fucking point transition segue into, yeah, Souls games are very inherently kind of, maybe, I'm gonna expound on this, but they're, at least on a surface, kind of 1v1 focused, and maybe that is also part of their popularity. But generally, when we speak of exemplary design, we think about, oh, games that let you manage crowds, games that have interesting hit states, interesting enemy states, properties. And I think Souls, with its camera setup, and with its generally kind of subby hitboxes, and with its a lot of the attacks are very targeted. You don't really have a lot of attacks that feel like they're designed for crowd control very much. And even then, I think as they add more of that stuff on top in games like Elden Ring, you notice that the crusty base underneath it, that again is very much built for these 1v1 locked-in encounters, doesn't really bring out the best of that. I think the Souls games, honestly, generally, they don't even really follow the paradigm of, yeah, I'm going between arena and arena, and then I'm thinking about how this encounter was designed, about how enemies, like, are coming at me from every angle. That's not really how they work. They usually are much more built as, like, obstacle courses, almost, where you're going through the seamless flow of situations where enemies are sort of perched in the most nasty, annoying positions, right? And then you have to deal with that however you can. I think that is sort of the most compelling thing about Souls. There was a tweet from our good buddy Roy about how much he loves the Taurus Demon. I think the Taurus Demon is a perfect example of, like, yeah, this is not like a boss with complex behavior or anything, but with how they set up the situation, it feels interesting. It feels like this unique experience, even if it's not that deep. And I think that is much more worth talking about than the ultimately still relatively shallow mechanics. Hot Pocket asks, is Doom 2016 better than Vanquish? This is a true Ziad lore deep cut. This is something that I said. And I kicked this around in my head a little bit. I thought about this for a minute. I don't know exactly what was wrong with me at the time. I think I got swept up in the fact that Doom 2016 is kind of a very pure and cohesive work when you're looking at it overall. Like, yes, there's a lot of elements to it that are kind of suspect, right? But at the time, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way, right? It was hard not to get swept up by the fact that it rejected a lot of the Gen 7 trends. It did not have a lot of set pieces, not a lot of, like, sort of forced story sequences or anything like that. I think with Doom 2016, the aesthetic of it, the idea of the glory kill as, like, the idea as a mechanic, not the mechanic itself, the idea as a mechanic and what it kind of represents, the way that feels, the way the game itself overall feels, the aggression and the rage that the game kind of puts forward. I think on that level, it was just too likable of a game, and it felt like this big cultural moment in that sense. And I made a big mistake. Yeah. Obviously, as an actual game, with a couple years of hindsight, with a cooler head, I could say, yeah, Vanquish it's just a much better game. It's a much better considered game, even if it has, I think, even the Gen 7 shit, the token set pieces, the sniper shit, not that bad. Honestly, kind of cute. Great campaign. I guess honestly at the time I was a little mad about Vanquish. I was like one of those, if Vanquish had a jump button, wouldn't that be sick? I was one of those guys a little bit. And I was a little bit in my sort of rigidity / movement fucking era, where Doom 2016, I'm not gonna say that game has movement or anything, but it is a little more loosey-goosey than something like Vanquish. And again, at the time, I was wrong, okay? That was a bad take. Kevin says, Valve is overrated. Aside from their more grassroots multiplayer publishing outputs, Counter-Strike, Dota, TF2, etc., Valve's main claim to fame is successfully making the iTunes of PC games. Half-Life feels like a Quake mod with unskippable cutscenes. Half-Life 2 is a good launcher for Ravenholm. And Portal is like 80% a tutorial. So, the thing about this take is that, honestly, a lot of the specific things in there, honestly, are a little hard to dispute. Especially I think Portal is one of those games where, upon closer examination, the thing that people always praise about it is how it guides you through its experience and, like, how seamless it is and all that shit, right? People very rarely talk about the puzzles being the most spatially insane thing to figure out, right? That might be kind of telling. I think Half-Life 2 is interesting because, at least in the hardcore gamer bubble, the sentiment around it is getting a little bit colder, and it has been getting colder for a while. I think on mainstream fucking Twitter, in the journo bubble, whatever, you would still be considered a crazy person if you said Half-Life 2 was mid or overrated, right? So I think you have a valid case that maybe the public sentiment is too heavily skewed in the positive direction, and not really analyzing the games too much. Portal is like that Ego Raptor analysis of Mega Man X opening stage for the whole game. That is so mean, but that is kind of the fucking the take I have in the back of my mind, honestly, thinking about it now. And I like the purity of Valve's games. I like the way they feel, if that makes sense. I think on a very surface level, there's something kind of special about that. Yeah, Absolute Eagle, I think I actually would like to revisit Portal for the experience, especially because it's such a short playthrough. It feels very tight. I think as an experience, it still probably holds up. Maybe not again, like I implied earlier, the complexity of the puzzles probably isn't there, but I don't know. Half-Life 1 is the one I'm the most curious about, because I think it does have the unskippable cutscenes and kind of rigidity syndrome. It's not a game that you're gonna play for. It's not like a Resident Evil 4 or something where, oh my god, I want to play this encounter again, or I want to play that encounter again. I want to try something different with AI. It is about, okay, I'm going through this fucking linear, very tightly choreographed experience. I think on those merits, Valve still kind of do it better than a lot of other developers. They do it in a very mechanical and pure way that I appreciate. More so than maybe, I don't know, a lot of those Sony studios, for example. Now, Half-Life 2 is the one, again, like I sort of implied earlier, that probably warrants the most re-examination. I still get people play that game now and be really into it, though. I still see that. So, I think maybe it is just a sensibility thing. I really want to check out Alex. Honestly, I'm very curious about it. I guess, Kevin, I see what you're saying about the individual quality of each game, of each respective game, but I kind of respect Valve's just texture and language in how they make their games a little too much to be comfortable calling them overrated. I think there is something... Valve, they give me the sense that they are led by very strong sort of beliefs in game design and very strong intuitions about game design that you feel very intuitively in their games. And that is just something that I personally value a lot, even if in practice it doesn't result in games that hold up insanely well. I think, again, as someone who hasn't played half of Alex, I would be surprised if that game didn't try to, like, seriously push things forward the same way Half-Life 2 tried the same thing, the same way Portal tried the same thing, the same way TF2 tried the same thing. Yeah, that level of effort to me is very valuable. Epson Eagle says, Capcom is remaking too many games, ruining their legacy in the process. Ooh, okay. For a while, I used to be in the camp that, yeah, well, remakes are kind of inherently different games, so it doesn't really matter, right? You can just treat it as a separate thing and just not care about it, and because it is effectively a new thing, the argument that it's taking away resources from potentially other things doesn't hold up on a surface level, right? That is definitely something I believed for a while. Now that we're staring in the face the possibility that, okay, the next 5 Resident Evil games will be remakes, I'm not so sure about that anymore. Aren't they just bringing an older classic to a modern audience? Well, no, because they're making a different game. It's just a completely different game, right? Like, you didn't, with RE4 Remake, you didn't bring RE4 to new audiences because it's a different game. You brought the aesthetic and the idea of RE4 to a new audience, I guess. But I think you see the capitalist interest in that a little too much. Obviously, they see the brand power of Resident Evil 4 specifically, individually, and then they want to capitalize on that. I can't really see it as this artistic motive of, oh my god, we want to widen the appreciation for this specific game, because then you would just make a really good port of RE4, right? If that was your goal. I don't think their remakes are gentrifying the old games, considering you can still buy a version of original RE4 on PSN and the remake. Yeah, I think that is something I value and respect. But anecdotally speaking, again, I don't know statistics on this, right? But anecdotally speaking, I have seen people be like, oh, well, I'm not going to play the original because it might spoil my experience with the remake. I want to play the remake as a stand-in for the original game. And then I'm probably never going to play the original. And that type of person probably wouldn't have played an old trusty PS1 game ever to begin with. So maybe nothing was lost in that process. But I guess I wish, rather than making remakes, we'd spend more effort somehow on making those older games more appealing. I don't know what that looks like exactly. I want to make a dedicated video about this, but this idea of access to games, to old games, or to the entire history of games, is sort of a weird conundrum to me, because I wish we had more statistics on who is actually utilizing that access, how many people are accessing old games on a regular basis. Is that actually something that is valuable? Is someone who's an enthusiast and who actually inherently cares about the history of games, right? They probably would inherently seek out a more authentic way to play those older games. The fact that I can buy RE4 on the PS4, original RE4, is that even valuable to me? Like, no, not really. I want to know how many Warzone normies that think the remake looks cool would hop on RE4 original. I don't know. Like, that's something I'm really curious about. So, about the idea of the remakes ruining Capcom's legacy overall, I don't think that is true. I think arguably Capcom are in their platinum era right now, actually. And I mean platinum era in the sense that, you know, maybe their golden era was like the arcade era or something. And then they had a big slump sort of in Gen 7, and now they're kind of back. At least that's sort of what the public sentiment is. You might not personally agree with it, but right now the vibe is Capcom are popping off. They can do no wrong, right? That's what seems to be the vibe on social media and all that shit. I think the average person, like, couldn't care less how well preserved a game like the original RE2 or the original RE4 is. So I don't know, it's really difficult. Again, for me, the real turning point was the realization that, wow, all the original REs are kind of bad now. Again, like Village was insanely poor, in my opinion. And that all this effort is pumped into rehashing older concepts with sort of watered down results. That's not how I would want Capcom to run, personally. But I think ultimately I do agree, on a very subjective gut level, they're remaking too many games. I do feel that. Alright, that was it for our first return, reboot, remake, deluxe remaster. Let's argue. Again, for the next episode, put your comments under this video or fucking send me on Twitter. I'm probably gonna make another tweet about this once I get in the mood for another episode. Subscribe, follow me on Twitch. Maybe you want to be on Twitch next time that I record one of these. You want to be in the chat and contribute. Support me on Ko-fi. Hope you had a great time and you have a great life. Okay. Cool.